How are you?
I'm great.
Good. You know, man, I miss you. I don't think I have seen you. When did we do the thing at the Country Radio Seminar, our interview? Was that 3 years ago?
Oh, yeah, that has been a minute. Yeah, is that the last time I saw you?
I think so. Well, you've been a little busy. Oh. You've had some things going on, a lot of which I want to talk about.
Well, I miss you.
Well, I miss you, too. So much going on with you. Got a new album coming out on May 9th for recreational use only. We'll talk about that a little bit. Where'd that title come from?
Well, I mean, look, one of my least favorite things to do is name tours and name albums. Like, I've never been good at it, and it's always like the last thing. Like, you work so hard on an album, getting it exactly where you want it, and then you think you're done, and then my manager calls and says, "Hey, man, you didn't name the album." I'm like, "Well, I don't know what to call the album. Like, how about we just call it like Blake Shelton number 12 or Blake Shelton 11 or something like that." And it's like, no, that's generic. Right. It sucks. And so I remember the day he called, he goes, "Man, they need the title like yesterday." And I just blurted out, "Well, what about for recreational use only?" And he goes, "Love it, we'll print it." And that's kind of how it happened. So,
in other words, he didn't really care. He just wanted a title.
That's right. Just needed something to put on there.
But as we said, album comes out May 9th, including the top 10 hit Texas. We'll talk about that later. Also about the new TV show that you're doing called The Road. Lots to do with my co-host Blake Shelton.
The first time I ever heard Texas would have been last fall. And at first I thought, man, I don't know about if I can get away with that, you know.
Why? What are you getting away with?
The demo was just very different than the record that we made on it. And if it wasn't for Scott Hendricks really pressuring me, like, man, just listen to it again, you know, like, I'm just telling you, there's something there. And the demo wasn't very country. It's the best way I know to say it, because it wasn't a different melody or anything. It just wasn't as country as I feel like I can get away with. And so when we finally did cut it, you know, that's when we came up and put all the steel guitar work and things like that on it. And I think the song stood on its own. And if it would have came out the way it did for somebody else, it still would have done what it's doing, because it's just a great song. But I think to make it work for me, we had to throw in, you know, a lot of steel guitar and things like that. And then because we went in, I think, with that in mind, we ended up with a really unique blend of what they did versus how, you know, what we did with our production, and it just turned into this infectious thing that I'm really super proud of.
And here it is, my co-host Blake Shelton. My co-host this week is Blake Shelton, which is always great news. We talked earlier about your current hit, Texas, and somewhere I read that you kind of credit getting together with Post Malone as kind of responsible for your rekindling your excitement about music and just your re-energizing, I guess.
Well, I don't know anybody that I've ever personally met that is more excited, first of all, just about music in general. But I mean, he's such a country music like nerd fan. Like he knows everything about it that you would just assume someone who's in a completely different genre of music. Like, why would he know, you know, so much about a fiddle player named Larry Franklin, you know, or all these artists, and that I would challenge you to find 50% of the current country music artists that don't know half of the stuff that Post Malone knows about music. So my point is, when you're around him, that's all he wants to talk about. That's all he can think about, you know. And that was inspiring for me, because it was like, dang, man, I mean, I hadn't thought about some of these guys you're talking about in years, and man, you're right, I do like that, and I do miss that. And man, I'm gonna dig out my old Paul Overstreet albums, and you know, next thing you know, you're just like, wow, you know, I'm fired up about this again, and he has the ability to do that to you.
Blake Shelton is my co-host this week, and up next is Luke Bryan, and just kind of fishing here, but I saw him post a video of somebody thinking he was Blake Shelton. Have you seen that?
I have. You know, Luke called me that day that it happened, and he was like, man, you ain't gonna believe this crap that just happened at the gas station, you know. And he started telling me the story. He was laughing so hard he could barely even tell me the story. And I was trying to tell Luke, I go, Luke, I bet you the guy didn't really think that you were me. I think he just had your name wrong. He was just trying to think of the country singer he sees on TV. And he's like, no, he thought I was you, you know. But I've had more people comment to me about Luke, you know, getting on social media and telling that story, you know. It's because it is so funny. Because that used to happen to me a lot. I didn't get Luke Bryan. I have gotten Luke Bryan a couple of times, but back in the day, I used to get Joe Nichols all the time. Joe Nichols was always the artist that, you know, people would walk up to me and,
really,
you know, say, are you Joe Nichols? You know, back when, you know, he and I were coming out at the same time. I used to always say, yes, I am Joe Nichols, and I hate my fans. And I hate children and puppies, you know, just to see the look on it, because I wouldn't have to take the blame then, you know.
Well, your latest case of mistaken identity is with Luke Bryan, who happens to be next in the countdown at 25. Country Song Came On. We're counting them down this week with Blake Shelton. As we mentioned earlier, your new album, For Recreational Use Only, is out on May 9th. And I have had a chance to listen to this, and I got to tell you, I forgot a little bit how good you are at making music.
Oh, my God. Thank you. I don't know. Is that wait a minute. I don't know how to take that from you, Lon.
No, that is a compliment. I mean,
okay,
you know what it is? It's, I guess I didn't realize it till I heard all this new music that I also missed new music from Blake Shelton.
Well, I appreciate it, buddy. I didn't realize how much I missed making it, to be honest with you, until, you know, we got and put this record together. And then, because I had some things recorded that I kind of been holding on to, and then to put all that together and go, oh, okay, well, now we need this, and this, I think. And, man, I got super into it and fired up this time, like the early days of making records when everything was still out in front of me, and there was so much mystery out there, you know, and I kind of felt that way again this time because it had been a long time. And, honestly, I didn't know if the door was going to still be open. It had been so long, you know. I mean, I don't think you're being honest with yourself if you don't have that thought, at least when you've been doing it as long as I have, like, man, you know, there's a new generation and then another new generation that have come along, you know, in the last few years. And so you have to think that way or you're not being honest. And so the excitement of watching Texas take off the way it did while we were still trying to finish up the album was even more, you know, inspiring and lit even more of a fire under me, you know.
And Texas has indeed taken off. It's way ahead in the top 10. Talk some more about the new album as we get along, too, with Blake Shelton. Blake Shelton in the co-host chair this week. Of course, Carly was out on the road with you a couple of years ago. And when she was in here as my co-host, she talked about that.
I feel like he views me as a little sister, kind of. And he is just crazy and fun. And the first night of the tour, he invited me and my band down to hang out with him, and they call it getting Blake Sheltoned, and I got Blake Sheltoned so hard that it pretty much put me out of commission for the next week. I drank way too much, and he made a joke that he thought up until then that I was straight-laced, and now he doesn't think I'm straight-laced. So, Blake, you definitely killed me almost on that first night.
That is so true. I really did think she was kind of a straight-laced and not really cut loose and pretty I don't even know how to word it really, but not a drinker. I'll say it that way, because I wanted to invite Carly to be on Barmageddon, which we did, and she did it. But I remember at the time thinking, but I don't know if she would want to be on Barmageddon. I mean, it's all these drinking games and we're cussing, and so she's right. I did think that, but she did prove me wrong that night, because we should have hidden the wine from her that night, actually.
The things that you learn about artists from the time of the road. Counting them down with Blake Shelton. As we've talked, your new album is called For Recreational Use Only, going to be out on May 9th. And, of course, as we always come to expect, it does include a song with your wife, Gwen Stefani.
Man, I don't know if I'm ever going to make another album. As long as Gwen is willing, I don't know if I'll ever make another album without having a duet with her on it, just because it's fun. And that's
you
what I
shouldn't.
want my albums to be. Yeah, I mean, and it's Gwen Stefani, right? So
right, you must always want that special song that you're going to do with Gwen. Maybe even, look a little harder criteria for that one with Gwen than maybe some of the others. So how'd you get to Hanging On?
Well, we don't even have to say, hey, do you want to do this song with me? We just kind of able to look at each other now. Like when we were listening, Scott Hendricks played me Hanging On, because Charles Kelly had sent it over for us, and it was just a moment where Gwen and I was like looking at each other going, you want to? Yeah, I will. We don't even have to say, hey, would you? There's no formal ask anymore with the two of us, because we've written so many songs together and recorded other songs together, and it's just a thing now with us.
Now, the song on the new album with Gwen is called Hanging On. You'll find it on Blake Shelton's new album that's out on May 9th. But we're going to go back for a previous duet from you two. Here's Blake and Gwen, Nobody But You. Blake Shelton is my co-host this week, and I want to talk here a little bit about your new reality TV show that you're producing. It's called The Road. Of course, you did the voice for, 23 seasons?
Yeah.
And it's really cool because your new show has a really different twist to it. Just give me that background of the concept for The Road.
For me, being a coach on The Voice for 23 seasons, if you have a job where you work for somebody for a long time, you can't help but at some point over time go, well, I tell you what, man, if I was the boss here, I would do it this way. I would do it this way or that way, and I would stop doing this, And even though The Voice was awesome, and it's a great show, you can't help but think, man, what if we did a show instead of doing this, we did this? And that's kind of how the Road came about. And then what if we did a show where it was about people trying to win over the audience for a big star, like basically the openers, and film it out in bars across the U.S. What if we went and captured those people? Because those people are doing something a little bit different. They're trying to win over people who probably didn't come there to hear them in the first place. While they're standing there waiting to see Keith Urban, they're sitting through these people they've never heard of before, and it's really a fun way to do a show. And then the people in the audience at the bar are who votes and decides who moves on.
Yeah, well, what a great idea. But hang on to that for a minute. Want to come back and talk some more about The Road? We'll do that with Blake Shelton after we get to 17. Blake Shelton is my co-host this week. We're talking about your new TV show called The Road that you're producing along with Taylor Sheridan. And of course, the way TV works, you've been out on the road at a bunch of different cities, but you just wrapped it up at the Ryman in Nashville. And how'd that go? Do you know the winner? And you just have to keep it secret now for 8 months?
Yeah, we do. We actually wrapped it up that night, and we had to clear the audience before we could announce the winner, so we could keep it under wraps for television. But we're done. We're finished with the season, and it's under wraps. I'll tell you what's cool about filming that finale at the Ryman was the finalists we had. They all three felt like they won. All three of their dream was to play the Ryman in the first place, you know what I mean? And so it's already like one that was like a check off the bucket list right there, just to perform at the Ryman. And so the fact that we were able to have the finale there was really special.
And does the winner get a record deal as part of this?
Winner gets a record deal with Triple Tigers is the record deal that they win, which is I think Scotty McCreery. That company gives people hits.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. Russell Dickerson and Scotty McCreery, right?
Yeah. And $250,000 cash, which
wow,
that's a big one. And then they get a spot performing on Stagecoach, and so it's a really cool prize package. But I got to say that record deal is super exciting for the winner, because I know that company delivers hits.
Because we're talking about The Road, new talent show from my co-host Blake Shelton, which premieres this fall on CBS TV. Blake Shelton in here as my co-host this week. And Blake, I was actually in the audience last October at the induction ceremony for the Country Music Hall of Fame. And of course, that night you performed a couple songs in honor of inductee Toby Keith. Tell me about that night.
When I was asked to do the induction for Toby, I was blown away, because I feel like Toby Keith, he was always and I think he loved it though, but he was always an outsider, you know, of Nashville. But I think he part of him, he loved that, you know. He kind of had this grudge with, you know, award shows and you know all that part of Toby, you know, and because of that, I feel like I was one of the few people, because I was around him so much, that he had a small circle, you know, of people that he kind of let into his world, but man, once you got inside that circle with him, you were there for life, and he was a very loyal guy and a loyal friend. He was a tough guy, don't get me wrong, and he was rough and tough, you know, but once you were in that with him, you know, he had you, he had your back, you know. And so for them to ask me to be one of the artists to perform for him was special to me.
Well, I'll add to that. It was a special night for everybody there too, including me. My count. And while we're listening to Old Dominion, you were telling me that you had another little nugget here.
I actually was playing. I called my friend David Vincent at Takamine, and I said, man, I want to buy one of those Toby Keith American flag guitars. I'm doing this induction thing for Toby at the Hall of Fame. They're finally bringing him in, and I'd love to have one of those American flag guitars like he played on the Angry American. And man, he told me, he said, you know what? There's only 4. We only ever made 4 in the world. He said, and I still have one of them. He said, I sent Toby 3 of them, and I kept one back in case they ever needed one shipped somewhere or something. You just never know, you know. And he said, I'm going to send you that one. And so I got to play one of Toby's American flag guitars that night, and they ended up giving me the guitar, which is really special to me.
That is really cool, and that night is just one of the most special here in Nashville, and that night I think even more so. We're counting them down this week with Blake Shelton. We now come to Kane Brown in the countdown, and when he was in here as my co-host, we talked about being on your TV show, Barmageddon.
That was probably one of the most fun times I've had on TV, honestly.
Yeah?
I was a little nervous when I got there because we known each other, but he's got a big personality, and like everybody knows I'm kind of laid back, and so he does all the talking. But he's like a big brother to me because he just picks on me all the time. But it's like a funny, you know, a fun thing. But I got to play the games, and I ended up being I think the first winner on Barmageddon. So it was cool.
He's absolutely right. He was the first person to ever win the show, and he's the first thing about Kane is like he's an athlete, so it's not fair. Like, he's actually in shape. He's good at those games, even though he's never played them before. Like, he's got good hand-eye coordination, and he is so laid back. He doesn't get worked up. So you're over there, you know, talking trash and telling him he sucks, and you know, all the stuff you would normally do in a competitive situation, and it just rolls off his back. You really can't get to that guy.
You're right. He is an incredibly athletic guy. And counting him down here with my co-host Blake Shelton. And we were talking earlier about the 23 seasons you spent on The Voice. And after you left, of course, Dan and Shay became coaches for a season. And when they were in here, Dan was talking about maybe both you guys returning to The Voice.
It would be amazing for us. We always say it every time we're around the producers of The Voice or the NBC folks. We're always like, hey, if we come back and do this, like, we should get Blake back. For one, it would be like the biggest season ever if Blake came back, because he was the show. But I feel like us and Blake, we go back 10 years. He took us on one of our very first tours, and we have a group chat with Blake, which we won't speak of the things that go back and forth in that group chat, as he's a very funny guy and he's a character, man. Still, after all these years, we love him, and doing a season with Blake would be amazing. So hopefully, if we get the invite to come back, we're going to be calling him and trying to convince him to come back. He'll do it eventually, I'm sure.
Man, I was so happy when I heard that they were getting Dan and Shay. Shay's one of the funniest people. I've like, not artists, like one of the funniest, wittiest people that I've ever met in my life. And you know that. I mean, it's just the stuff that comes out of that guy's mouth is just greatness, you know. So when I heard they were putting those guys on the show, I was happy, because I thought it's high time people start to figure that out about what they do, because all their music is like these, love songs and super like over the top love ballads, you know, and it's like, yeah, but if you knew what was really coming out of Shay's mouth, you'd be shocked right now, you know.
He's pretty much a joker too.
I know it. It's been fun to watch their careers explode the way it has.
Blake Shelton is my co-host this week, and we just heard Dan talk about maybe returning to The Voice someday. Is that door still open for you, or is that totally closed?
Well, the people that work at The Voice, the producers and people behind the scenes are like family to me. And I think the door would still be open. I mean, maybe not while I'm making another competition show on a different network, but I do think it still is open, and I look forward to going back and doing things here and there. The show changed my life, and it's just a different kind of show than what we're doing. It's not, that doesn't mean we're going to do something better. We're just going to do something different, you know, because I think there's a lane for it.
Well, I hope so. I think that would be pretty cool. I mean, it'd be a pretty big event for The Voice if you ever got back there. Speaking of back, we're getting back to the countdown here with Blake Shelton. Blake Shelton is this week's co-host, and, a lot of folks have been in here talking about your hit Texas, including Jelly Roll.
Oh, dude, this Blake Shelton Texas song, to me, reminds me of like what made me love that era of country music. Like the whole Blake era was like that. Down here, she's probably in Texas. It's just got a swag to it. It's just so Blake Shelton. I think it's like my pre-party song right now. This Blake Shelton song is the jam.
Man, that's cool. Obviously I love Jelly Roll. Everybody does. It's impossible not to love this guy. We had him on. We had him on Barmageddon, and it was so fun, man. We had this game where it was like you hold on. We had the human-sized version of foosball where Jelly Roll had to like hang on to a bar, and he was our goalie. He probably hates Barmageddon more than anybody. He had a rough day that day, but we had a lot of fun, and he was a trooper, and that was the first time I really spent any time around him was that day, and I was impressed by the guy because he's just such a happy guy. He's a lot like Post Malone in that way, actually.
Blake Shelton's helping me count down the hits this week, and your song is next in the countdown. As you were mentioning earlier, it's been like 4 years since your last album. Just kind of, I guess, what went through your mind as you were about to go back in the studio to record this new music?
Well, I had a lot of thoughts. One of them was to thank God for Luke Combs and this new Zach Top kid because I didn't have to change that much to try to fit in.
How about Zach Top, huh?
Yeah, I mean, they're bringing this, this sound back from, 25, 30 years ago, which is about the time I was getting going, and it's like, oh, I can just do me again. And so I really did. I just went in, and I went to what Jelly Roll was saying. It was like, about Texas. It's like, man, I can kind of just do me, just try to find the best songs I can find that fit and make sense for who I used to be and the kind of records I was making when we had Hillbilly Bone and some of those records and see what happens, and then sure enough, we cut Texas and was able to stole a little bit of Thinking Thing from Trace Atkins, with that steel guitar riff, and I feel like that song's its first cousin. And I don't think Trace will sue me, though. So, and then it turned out there was still an audience out there for that thing. Thank God.
Well, personally, I think there's always an audience for Blake Shelton music. And you are at number 7 this week with Texas. And Blake, before we leave that song, of course, you name-checked George Strait in the chorus. Just kind of curious if you've heard from the King.
I haven't heard from George Strait on a telephone ever, which is sad to me. That was one of my... If I could get a phone call or a text from anybody, on my bucket list would be George Strait. I only get to talk to George when I see him somewhere, which is nerve-wracking, by the way. But I don't know what he thinks. I don't know what he thinks of. Hopefully, I'll get his blessing in person one of these days, or maybe he could just get my phone number and send me a thumbs up emoji.
That's pretty good, right? An emoji from the King. I guess you never know. We are going to head back to the countdown with Blake Shelton. Blake Shelton is my countdown co-host this week. I want to talk about this TV show that you hosted about a month ago. Just absolutely incredible. It was a 3-hour TV special celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Grand Ole Opry, and it looked like such a blast.
Lon, it really was, and this was artists that were super excited to be a part of it, and artists that probably wanted to be a part of it, and they just ran out of time. And it literally felt like some kind of a family reunion backstage, not in a corny way either. I don't mean it to sound like that. It was a special night, and I was honored that they asked me to be a host. You know, Gwen, I wasn't even nervous until Gwen said to me, she goes, and it was the day of, she goes, think about this, Blake. She goes, can you believe that your star is where it is to have been asked to be the host for the 100th anniversary of the Grand Ole Opry, and you're the guy that happens to be in this moment. Actually, she worded it in a way that I was just like, oh my God, stop, you know, you're freaking me out. So I'm glad she did it, because I did need to be a little bit nervous, I think, to be as, you know, the best version of myself as I could be, because that's where the excitement comes from for me, is when I get nervous.
Yeah, really just a spectacular night, of course, as the Grand Ole Opry celebrates its 100th birthday this year. We're counting down the hits here with Blake Shelton, and as we talk through the show, you've got so much going on, the TV show, and of course the new music, but something else you're involved with that I'm interested in. Tell me about this Keith Whitley documentary that you're doing.
Oh, I'd love to. So, you know, in more recent times, you know, our kids have started discovering some of these older artists, you know, and Keith Whitley being one of them, and to the point in the last couple of years, I told Gwen, she was listening, and she said, oh my God, I just love this song, you know. And she didn't really know much about Keith Whitley's story, just that he had passed away a long time ago. And I started like looking it up on my phone and realized there is no Keith Whitley documentary. And for a guy who only made 3 albums before he died, you know, 3 studio albums before he died, and has had this much of a long-lasting impact on country music. And so I finally decided, you know, we really want to do this, and we want to do it right. You know, we want to make a documentary on Keith Whitley's life, and the guy had some demons. He had a disease, and he just couldn't win, you know. But what an incredible singer and artist he was.
Oh yeah, and just the amazing impact for a short career that he had on so many other singers. Look forward to seeing your doc. And there they are, the top 30 country hits in the USA as compiled by Country Air Check. We've been counting them down here with Blake Shelton, and your summer is festivals, and you got a few dates there for us.
Yeah, I'm going down to, this is going to be fun, Tampa on May 3rd, and then also Panama City on June 1st. I'm going to be doing the CMA Fest this year on June the 7th, and then Salinas, California, June 27th. And then Fort Laramie, Ohio, July 12th.
All right. At least you're going to be working a little bit this summer. The current hit is Texas. New album for recreational use only, out on May 9th. Man, as always, I know how much stuff you got going on. Always appreciate your time to help me count down the hits here, Blake.
You're the best, buddy. Can't wait to see you again.